On the 2nd of April of 1968, 2001 A Space Odyssey debuted in US cinemas. It then received a big premiere in the UK on the 15th of May. If you were lucky enough to catch the early US release ahead of time, then you would have been treated to some exclusive scenes that have been excluded in both the premiere and all subsequent re-releases of the movie. You see, a month earlier, between the 5th and 9th of April, Kubrick got to work to some last-minute edits of the film, removing from 17 to 19 minutes. And Kubrick, being the perfectionist he was, he took special precaution to make sure that none of the cut content would ever see the light of day. Although, fortunately for film history, that in 2010 director Doug Trumbull revealed at a Space Odyssey screening that Warner Brothers had relocated an unspoiled original print in a salt mine in Kansas. But unfortunately, at least for us the public, given the rather complicated history of Kubrick and his deleted scenes, they're probably not going to be released for the public to see, at least not anytime soon. But while we're in this uncertain limbo to pass a wee bit of time, let's ponder as to what may have been cut. And thankfully we've got some eyewitness accounts of the original release by two individuals, John F. Davison and Art Hawke. So sit back and relax as we unravel the mysteries, at least on the cutting room floor of 2001 A Space Odyssey. Initially, Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick wrote an opening narration for the movie, but eventually down the road, Kubrick decided against it. It's believed that the dialogue never got as far as being recorded. Another idea to open up the movie was going to be black and white interviews of lead scientists discussing about the possibility of there being life beyond Earth.
What form of life do you think this would be likely to be?
Quite impossible to tell. All we can say is that I think there's every possibility that there is intelligent life scattered pretty widely throughout the universe.
Going by the eyewitness accounts, no such opening was ever present during the initial showings, so this was presumably dropped very early on. There was quite a fair bit of footage that was filmed for the Dawn of Man segment that wound up being edited out during later edits of the film, although it didn't change the directory of the story. However, a slight tweak edit was made. During the shot where the ape is giving some pause, a shot of the monolith was added in to further distinguish a connection to the audience of the monolith and man's first tools. You can tell that it's a reused shot of the monolith being used 40 seconds earlier, as the clouds are in the exact same place. This was an edit that was done after the initial release. In the book, with the ape's newfound tools, they go off and kill the leopard that attacked the clan much earlier. No such scene appears in the final cut, and according to the eyewitness accounts, it was as well not present in the early screenings, so perhaps it never got shot to begin with. Also, while it's expanded much further in the novel, in both renditions of the story, there's a rivalry between two tribes. We would have seen the lead ape of the bone, named Moonwatcher in the book, leading and sneaking up on the rival clan and killing several apes. But in the final film, we only see this conflict during the midway point, hence why there's a sudden jump cut straight into the conflict. Initially during pre-production of the segment, that early man was going to be represented by Neanderthals. However, down to how exposed these designs were, it was decided to head further back for the evolution of man. Not only that, but it's also currently scientifically believed that it was the early hominids that had the ingenuity of forging tools, which were very ape-like, like the ones that are seen in the movie. A fun bit of trivia, one of the female costumes had a nursing mechanism built in its chest, designed to breastfeed one of the chimpanzee babies. While this never got to be featured in the final film, it's certainly an example of the filmmakers going that extra mile of trying to make the natural world of the movie seem as realistic as possible. However, a little pet peeve of mine from when I was a kid was being a bit perplexed of seeing tapirs in Africa, despite that megafauna only being found on the South American continent and down in Southeast Asia. For years I wondered if the filmmakers were trying to illustrate the extinct genus of Morotherium, who convergently evolved to look very similar to tapirs. But after looking into it, that's not the case. The filmmakers only purely chose the tapir, mainly because it would look most exotic to a lot of people, that and they're quite docile around humans. So certainly they wouldn't prove to be too dangerous around the actors.
Are you coming to my party tomorrow?
I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I can't. I'm going to send you a very nice present, though.
Yes?
What?
A bush baby.
A bush baby? Well, we'll have to see about that.
There was a following deleted scene where we would have seen R. Floyd ringing up Macy's to order a bush baby. Apparently, Vivian Kubrick, the director's daughter who played the little girl in the film, wasn't under a script, so she made up the dialogue on the spot. So her answer that she wanted a bush baby was pretty spontaneous. Both of Kubrick's daughters appeared in another scene that wound up being cut. This was a group of children receiving an art lesson on the headquarters of the moon base. Another addition that wasn't added not until the UK premiere was the title card Jupiter Mission 18 months later. Perhaps it was added to give a more clear 3-act structure. Act 1 being the Dawn of Man, which includes all the apes and moon-based stuff. Then Act 2, dubbed the Jupiter Mission, being about the conflict with Howl. And then Act 3 with the title card Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite, all following the final fate of Dave Bowman. What would have followed after Poole's exercise would have been a little montage of life on board the ship. A unique object that was meant to be on board the Discovery Centrifuge was a piano, and it appears in a few photographs that Dave was meant to put it to good use. However, no such scene appears in the final film, although if you look very carefully, then you can see that the keyboard still made it in the far background, in a couple of shots. Happening just after the intermission, the longest cut scene that was removed from the premiere was Poole preparing for what would turn out to be his final spacewalk. In the movie, it cuts away to the final blow that kills Poole. However, what visually happened did get as far as storyboarding. Before Poole's death, we would have seen Howl disrupt the radio communication. A line of Dave asking about radio communication is still retained in the final cut.
Made radio contact with him yet?
The radio is still dead.
When Dave goes out on his retrieval mission, collecting the body of his fallen colleague, as he enters into the task, he originally had a lengthy bit of dialogue. He had to deliver all the lines within just one take. Actor Kildalia had the dubious task of trying to remember it perfectly.
So I never memorized lines so hard in my life as that sequence. It was cut, but do you know, because of the way I worked on it.
For those of you who are wondering as to what the dialogue was, well, it was basically space gobbledygook, perhaps not the most thrilling bit of dialogue to be removed from the film. Well over 55 years later, actor Mr. Dahlia can still, just by memory, recite the deleted line.
Mission Control, this is X-Ray Delta 1. At 1920 onboard fault prediction center in our 90000 computer showed Alpha Echo 35 unit as possible failure within 48 hours. Request check your in-ship system simulator. Also confirm your approval our plan to go EVA and replace Alpha Echo. Goes on like that. I still remember it. And it was never used in the film.
I kinda wonder if he knows what any of it means, but anyhow. There is some convention footage where you can hear him say the line all the way through. I was going to include it here, but I decided not to, as unfortunately it's a little bit difficult to make out what he's saying, as he's heavily drowned out by other noises around the convention. But if any of you still want to watch the video in full, then it's quite easy to find. 2 takes were filmed of Dave going through the emergency airlock. One showed Dave going through without his space helmet, the other take had his helmet in place. The reason why it was filmed like this was because Kubrick feared that it wouldn't be realistic of somebody surviving in the vacuum of space. However, then consulting with some scientists, he learned that it is just possible for somebody to survive for about a few seconds. I'm so glad that they used the take with Dave without his space helmet, as it just helps to make it far more suspenseful.
Without your space helmet, Dave, you're going to find that rather difficult.
Hal, I won't argue with you anymore. Open the doors.
Dave, this conversation can serve no purpose anymore.
During one of the final moments in the film, where it appears that Dave lives out his years in a Renaissance room, there was a cut moment where he would have came across a gown on the bed, and according to the recollection of Art Hawks, he distinctly remembers Bowman holding a slipper and being so shocked to see something so familiar. If you look carefully for when Dave enters into the restroom, you can see that the dressing gown has been unfolded on the bed. To end things off, I'm going to be going over some unmade projects of the Space Odyssey franchise. In 1982, Arthur C. Clarke published a follow-up novel titled 2010 Odyssey 2. 2 years later, it was made into a movie, but renamed as 2010 The Year We Made Contact. The same actors who played Hal and Dave Bowman reprised their roles in the sequel, but the character of Ray Floyd was recast and instead played by Roy Scheider. Arthur C. Clarke wrote 2 more additional sequels, 2061 Odyssey 3, published in 1987, although Clarke wanted to release it to coincide with the NASA Galileo mission, mainly down to Jupiter and its moons, playing a vital role in the narrative. Although due to delays with the NASA mission, he released it prematurely. And 3001 The Final Odyssey, released 10 years later in 1997. The 4th entry actually brings Poole back into the narrative, despite being killed off in the original story. The sequels certainly progressively became more out there as they went along. By the publication of 3001, there were discussions to potentially adapt the 2 other books, with Tom Hanks reported to play a character in the 3001 movie. By 2001 though, it was reported that the idea was abandoned, although in 2014 it was reported that the TV network Sci-Fi had commissioned a miniseries based off the book of 3001. Both the estates of Clarke and Kubrick gave their blessings and approval over the project. The last update occurred in 2016, that a pilot for the series was still in development, but nothing else has been heard of the Odyssey series.